This past spring, when Artemis II launched, it was the first time in 53 years that we had sent human beings to the moon, which means that for many of us, this was a chance to relive something our parents and grandparents, many of you, lived through in your own youth. That particular, almost impossible feeling of looking up at the night sky and knowing that we were there, that human beings were there, that the distance between this earth and the pale light overhead had actually somehow been crossed. I watched it with my family, and I have to tell you, it was one of the most inspiring things I have ever seen. And I have not been able to let it go since. Because somehow in all of it, beneath the science and the engineering and the spectacle, there also seemed to be something deeply human about it. Something about what happens to people when they carried beyond the imaginable and brought home again. As you may know, the mission had 4 crew members: Reed Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Koch, and Jeremy Hansen, and thousands of support crew here on Earth. But these four trained together for years before they ever left the ground. Years of simulation, of practice runs, of learning the systems, but also, slowly, of learning each other. Learning how to work in close quarters, learning how to give grace when there was no room for ego, learning what each person needed and what each person could give, and what it would cost to lose the trust of even one of them. They did not become a crew overnight. They had to practice becoming one. And on April 6th, the world watched as the Orion spacecraft, carrying all 4 of them, slipped behind the far side of the moon. And for 40 minutes, all communication with Earth went silent. Not a glitch, not a malfunction, but a planned blackout. The moon itself blocking every signal, every radio wave, every thread of connection between the crew and the rest of humanity. For 40 minutes, they were completely out of contact. Just before they went behind the moon, astronaut Victor Glover radioed Mission Control. "Thank you for allowing us the immense privilege to be on this journey together," he said. And then silence. While they were behind the moon, they did not stop working. They took photographs, they made observations, but for just a moment, they paused, gathered around, all 4 of them, and shared what they had: maple cream cookies, taking it all in before getting right back to work, right back to the science. In an interview afterwards, I heard Victor Glover say that when the signal went dark, his very first instinct was to pray, and then to trust. He trusted the mission, trusted the physics, trusted the crew beside him, and so he knew he could get back to work. 40 minutes, the most isolated human beings in the history of deep space, holding the mission, holding each other in the dark. I don't think they survived the silence because they had all the answers. They survived it because they had learned how to belong to one another. This Sunday, we find ourselves in a strange in-between place in the church calendar. Ascension happened just this past Thursday, that holy and bewildering moment when Christ is taken from the disciples' sight, lifted into mystery, leaving them standing in the open air, staring upward into the place he once was. And Pentecost, the fire and wind and spirit rushing in, is still a week away. The disciples are living in the space between promise and fulfillment. Christ has gone from their sight, the Spirit has not yet come, and everything feels uncertain, unfinished, and unresolved. The signal has gone quiet. And yet they are not without hope. Jesus told them the Spirit was coming. They just do not know what it will look like yet, or when or how this frightened little community could possibly become the church. We are living in a moment when many of the things we once counted on feel unstable in our country, in our institutions, in our common life, and sometimes even within ourselves. There are moments when the future feels difficult to read, moments when God can seem harder to hear, moments when we find ourselves suspended between what has been and whatever comes next. Not because God has vanished, but because presence now comes differently, and we are still learning how to recognize it. In Acts, just before the Ascension, the disciples ask Jesus one last question. Lord, is this the time? Is this finally the moment when everything resolves, when the uncertainty lifts, when we understand what all of this has been for? And Jesus, in that tender and slightly maddening way of his, does not really answer the question. Instead, he says, "It is not for you to know the times. You will not be handed a map before the journey begins. What you will receive is the Spirit, and you will be my witnesses." He leaves them not with certainty, but with a calling, with work still to do. And then he is gone, and they stand there staring up into the absence. I think that's what any of us would do, because whatever else Ascension is, it had to have felt disorienting, confusing, maybe even for a moment, like abandonment, like standing on the far side of the moon, unable to hear the familiar voices that had guided you this far. Everything has changed, and nothing looks different yet. Resurrection has happened, and the world is still broken. Christ is risen, and now Christ is gone from their sight. They are standing at the threshold of something immense that they cannot yet see. And the angels appear and ask them gently, "Why do you stand looking up toward heaven?" As if to say, you know how to do this. As if to remind them that this is the moment that they have been preparing for all along. As if to say, go back to each other, back to the upstairs room, and pray. This moment between Ascension and Pentecost is not a moment of resolution. It's a moment of waiting, and more than that, of being formed in the waiting. We hear in the gospel this morning that long before any of this, before the cross, before the resurrection, before the ascension, Jesus prays, not for certainty, not for an easier road. He prays for oneness, that they may be one, he says, as we are one. That prayer was spoken in the shadow of everything that was about to happen. And now the disciples are living inside it, standing in that open air, finding their way back to each other, climbing the stairs to that upper room. They are the answer to the prayer Jesus prayed before he died, and so are we. But that kind of oneness, it does not mean sameness. It does not mean the absence of doubt or disagreement. It means learning, slowly, to hold the self a little more loosely, to let go of performance, to surrender ego for the sake of love, to trust the people beside you, and to belong to something larger than yourself. That kind of oneness is not automatic. It is practiced. It is what we set out to do every time we gather. And this is precisely what the church is for. The liturgy we follow, the seasons we keep, the prayers we return to again and again, these are not habit, they are training. Week after week, we practice how to pray together, how to serve one another, how to tell the truth without abandoning each other, how to remain at the table even when faith feels thin or staying becomes hard. And in a world that rewards performance, outrage, speed, and self-protection, that kind of life begins to look almost strange. It is countercultural. But this is not about building a community that fits into the world. It is about becoming people capable of love that changes the world. And so we carry that practiced love back out into the world when we go. We practice becoming one, imperfectly, but faithfully together, so that when the signal goes quiet and certainty fails, we know how to remain together in the dark. To gather when we do not know what comes next, to pray when we do not have the words, to feed one another, to serve the world anyway, and to remain. When the Orion spacecraft came around from the far side of the moon and Earth came back into view, they called it Earthrise. The planet swimming up over the lunar horizon, blue and luminous and small against all that darkness, fragile, beautiful, and borderless. And astronaut Christina Koch radioed back, "It is so great to hear from the Earth again." Friends, there are moments, sometimes sudden, sometimes quiet, when what has been holding you all along comes back into view. Moments when the presence of God, the love of the people beside you, the possibility of hope and communion and new life break through again with startling clarity. It might not be resolution or all the answers, but it's the knowing, bone deep and heart wide, that you were never alone, that the God who sent you into the dark was already there, waiting in the turning, waiting in the love you practiced for each other all along. But in the moments like now, where we are still living in the in-between, we do what the crew did on the far side of the moon. We do what the disciples did in that upstairs room. We say a prayer. We turn to the people beside us. We share what we have. We keep working, and we trust. And we wait together in the beautiful and holy dark for the moment when Earth swims back into view. Amen.